Oh, my fiery feet, my burning feet of fire. In 2002, I bought an Akai MPC 2000 on eBay.
But seriously, I have a story to tell you. So I did buy an Akai MPC 2000 on eBay in 2002, and I'd been living down here in the cities at my dad's house, just working, making some money, and that's what I spent most of it on. And then I decided to go back up to Grand Marais and stay at my mom's house, her trailer in the woods. I recorded a lot of music in my bedroom. I was working at 6 in the morning making breakfast at a restaurant up there badly. I cook a lot better now than I did then. I just made a ton of music that summer. I was a student of hip-hop. I had been a fan of hip-hop ever since I was 12, 13 years old. And then I went through a big punk rock phase, punk rock era. Not a phase, but I went through an equivalent love of punk rock to what I had of hip-hop, and it's kind of always been that. Now it's just bounced back and forth. There's a lot of similarities between the two, honestly. We'll get into that. But I was a student of hip-hop. I was ordering a lot of CDs off Amazon, which felt like a whole different kind of Amazon back then than it does now. But it was a good way to get cheap, used copies of CDs and get it up there to Grand Marais, which isn't a place where you can buy a lot of old school hip hop. But so I was listening to De La Soul. De La Soul is Dead constantly, and sometimes I'd come home maybe a little drunk and or high and just lay in bed and put the headphones on and listen to De La Soul is Dead. I remember doing that on several occasions. It's an amazing album, a big influence on me. And then I got Slick Rick, the Great Adventures of Slick Rick from, I think it's like 1989 that came out. And still, listening to Slick Rick now, I'm still just like, how is he doing that? How is he rapping that smooth, creative storytelling style? And then just listening to some other classic stuff that I was kind of more familiar with, like the Beastie Boys, License to Ill. And so that's really where the inspiration for the Wendigo song came from, was Slick Rick. I wanted to tell stories. I wanted to tell story raps, and License to Ill, specifically Paul Revere, the song Paul Revere, just because it has that strange backwards beat. And so I wanted to make a beat that was bizarre, old school and bizarre, and a story rap, also like Paul Revere and Slick Rick. And so that was the mindset that I had going into creating the Wendigo. And I was also reading a book called The Wendigo by Algernon Blackwood. I believe he's British. And that book is a little problematic. It's racist. Yeah, he's not so kind with the way he words things about the Native Canadians. From what I recall, I haven't read that book in 25 years. But yeah, so I remember sitting in my bedroom in the trailer in the woods outside of Grand Marais and just banging out that funny beat on the Akai and then playing some keyboards on it. I still don't really know how I created that sound. It's really dissonant, I think, is the way you would describe that. It's just an odd set of notes that don't really sound all that good together, but they sound very spooky. And then I wrote this rap about the Wendigo. Other things to say about the Wendigo. So being that I spent the majority of my life in northern Minnesota, you kind of almost believe in that.
Okay, so not everyone up north believes in ancient forest spirits, but real ones do.
And it's really popular in culture at this point. I believe there's I typed it in the other day looking for my own song on Apple Music, and there was seemingly 100 songs called The Wendigo that came up. And there's movies. There was a movie in the early 2000s that was called The Wendigo, and it was really bad. It had a really cheesy monster, but I remember renting that movie several times just because I loved the idea of it. I always wanted it to be better than it was. So I watched it a few times. And there was another movie called Ravenous, starring that guy from Trainspotting, Robert Carlyle, and that was just more about Wendigo possession.
Psychosis. The term is Wendigo psychosis.
But in northern Minnesota, and particularly in northern Cook County, you can feel something in the woods. You can feel the loneliness and something in the wind. And last time that I lived up there, when I had my bakery, I had a dream that the Wendigo was hunting me, like coming to my house.
Do you like to come to my house?
And I posted about it the next morning on Facebook after I woke up. And then a friend of mine sent me a message and said, you need to make a tobacco offering and get some tobacco and throw it in the 4 directions. And so I did. I got my stepdad to drop off some tobacco and I threw it out. And so it's, you know, the Wendigo's not to be taken lightly. I probably throw the name around a bit too much by making a song about it and a video about it. And yeah. I probably played that song live maybe 3 or 4 times, and I believe the first 2 or 3 times would have been with my band Xchange in Duluth. Well, the first time we played it in practice, I was amazed that those guys could figure out a way to actually make, you know, those dissonant keyboard notes, chords come across on the guitar and the bass. And it sounded spooky as hell. It was really spooky. And I remember we played at Pizza Luce shortly after that. And when we started playing that song, like the crowd just went completely still. And everyone just stood and watched like they were listening to someone tell a story, you know, like tell a ghost story. That's how it felt. Like everyone looked at me differently than they normally would at a show. Because a lot of the times at a show, you got people dancing around, waving their arms, you know, yelling, and sometimes a guy up front heckling me. But it's like the crowd just stood there with their mouths open and watched us play this song and listened to all the words, because it was a spooky song and just, you know, the way it sounded, the story. But like I said, I wrote that song in 2002, recorded it, and kind of just kept it to myself. You know, the friends, family heard it, the guys from Crew Jones heard it. And then in 2004, maybe you can't see this in this lighting, I released this CD, The Best of Ray the Wolf, 3 Things. So when I did release it, I sold it strictly out of the Electric Fetus. I may have brought it to some live shows when I was still playing in Crew Jones, but I don't really recall. And so directly across the street from Pizza Luce is where I sold that CD. And it got reviewed in the Ripsaw one time, which was kind of cool, like as a potential Christmas gift, which is funny that someone might have received my, you know, Xerox CDR for Christmas, but hopefully they enjoyed it. I mean, it's good songs. I feel like it literally is some of my best work that I ever did. So I am proud of it. And it contains the Wendigo. And so I looked this up, but Atmosphere did play 2 different 2-night stands at Pizza Luce around that time, like in 2005 and then again in 2007. And I didn't go to either of those just because I wasn't really a fan of going to Pizza Luce when large acts like that would come, because it, you know, it only held 300 or 400 people and it would just be wall to wall. And I was, you know, the parent of a young child at this point, and I was working early mornings and I was doing my own shows, so I just felt like if I was gonna, you know, spend a night and be exhausted the next day, it would just be for my own performances and not for going to see someone else. But of course I would have loved to go. And I did see Atmosphere when they came to Duluth in 2012 at the Clyde Iron, and that was really fun. I had too much to drink, but it was a fun time. So I was first introduced to Atmosphere's music in the year 2000. I'd been a pretty dedicated punk rocker for the last 4 years leading up to that, just writing and recording, making songs, playing shows. So anyway, I met a couple of guys who were moving up to Grand Marais from the summer, who had connections to the area. You know, they weren't just coming out of nowhere, but they, you know, they were from down here in the St. Paul area, and they had been making rap music together. And I had a drum machine. I had this drum machine and a Lesis that I had bought for making punk, because sometimes it was, you know, hard to get a drummer, hard to get somebody to come out to my house and
Do you like to come to my house?
play, you know, just depending. People came and went. But these guys were like, oh yeah, you have a drum machine. And I had previous rapping experience. I had lived in Minneapolis from when I was 11 till I was 15, and, you know, really got caught up in the culture of Minneapolis public schools and introduced to a lot of rap, a lot of cool rap. I bought Wu-Tang Clan Enter the 36 Chambers on cassette tape when I was 13, you know, when it was relatively new. And I would go up north for the weekend and make my mom listen to it in the car and say, look, Mom, like, you hear how their style is so different? You hear that rhyme style is so different than this other rap that we listen to? And where was I? Okay, yeah, so I had rapping experience. I used to be brewskis. I would write and record, well, not really. I would write to no music, write raps to no music. Yeah, I was introduced to the music of Atmosphere. I think the first time I ever heard any of it, a friend of mine drunkenly rapped like a verse of it to me while we were outside smoking a cigarette. And that was the first time I ever heard, but you just like, you got to hear this guy slug. You got to hear him. You got to hear Atmosphere. And I think some of the first stuff that he was on that I heard was like Deep Puddle Dynamics, and then Dino Spectrum, which is a Minnesota hip hop classic, and then Overcast, of course, and then like the Lucy Ford EPs were still being released. I think like half of it was out. I don't remember how that worked. I don't remember the timeline, but we were very eager for the Lucy Ford EPs. So like when that was completed and the CD came out, because I remember it came out in records. There was like those blue records with the truck on the front with the Minnesota plates, and we studied the heck out of those songs. It was really something. Oh, and the Sep 7 tape. I had the Sep 7 tape that I bought at Fifth Element. And yeah, so I was a big fan. And they introduced me to other stuff around that time, like Latyrix, Dose 1, what else? Eventually Quasimodo. We got Quasimodo, and that was incredible. But I remember going into the Fifth Element and buying a couple of CDs one time, and Slug was behind the counter, like being the cashier selling the stuff, and he made some sort of joke, towards me, like, in a nice way, like not at me, but just he was just cracking a joke, and I just, laughed and went along with it and acted like I didn't know who he was, or, I just didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I generally don't really want to go up to famous people or people that I admire, and, But another wild thing about 2002 was the release of God Loves Ugly, which is hands down my favorite Atmosphere project and an absolute classic. And I ordered that online from Sandbox Automatic, and it came to me, I think, the day it was released, like on that. I don't know, maybe records were still released on Tuesdays at that point, so maybe it was later. But it got to me like later that week, and I remember going over to my friend's house and going down to his room in the basement and just basically making him listen to it. But we sat there and listened to it a couple times in a row, and my mind was just, I just loved it instantly. It just had so much attitude and just like this dark undertone. The beats are really kind of sparse and dark, and the lyrics are great, and he really just hands it to a lot of these underground amateur rappers that, are competition, and lets them have it, and then just also says a bunch of, really interesting things. I still love that album. But that summer of making beats and raps in my mom's house with the Akai MPC 2000 was some of my best stuff. Like, I just feel like that was kind of one of my peaks, like musical, creative peaks. It was really channeling something and just studying and trying to make something for myself with music, and the Wendigo was a part of that. Over the years, there's been a lot of mentions that my rap style is similar to Slug's, and it makes sense. Like, there's times where I hear his records and I feel like, I definitely sound like that. But it makes sense. Like, we both are more or less from the same place. Like I said, I lived in South Minneapolis for 4 years when I was growing up, middle school and 1 year of high school. We actually went to the same high school, Washburn, but he's 8 years older than me, so not at the same time. And I only went for freshman year, and then I moved up to Grand Marais. But not only are we from the same place, I think we're both students of old school East Coast hip hop. It's more just being a student of those rhyme styles and those techniques. And again, being from the same place. I mean, how many rappers that are from different regions sound similar? I feel like that's fairly common, maybe less so nowadays with the internet, but it still probably holds true. And again, I fully admit it. I admire his music, and there's no way it didn't rub off on me in a lot of ways. So in 2011, Atmosphere released The Family Sign, and there's a song on there called Became, the third song on the album. And I remember the first time I listened to it, it just reminded me of the Wendigo, like kind of right away. It's about the narrator of the rap, like waking up at a campsite in the woods in the winter and looking for a friend who isn't there anymore, who like got out of their tent and left and is walking down a trail. And then he follows them and notices wolf footprints in the snow. And we'll get into the lyrics more later, but it just had some similarities. Like right off the bat, I just thought, well, it's not as dissonant. I really hope I'm using the right word, as the Wendigo is, but it's kind of moody, not uplifting sounding. And it's a story rap, and he's in the woods. And then the similarities of the lyrics just get to be where I'm like, yeah, this has to be like a reference to my song. Like he must have heard the Wendigo. There's no way that these are just completely coincidences. But I also will say, right before I came down here to record this, I asked the internet what it thought the song was about, and it pulled up some information about that it's like drug addiction, about losing friends to drug addiction. So if that's what it is, like, I mean, absolutely no disrespect. And that's obviously a serious topic, and it can be very personal. So, if this has nothing to do with me, I completely understand that. And it's something that I can make a video about, and get people's opinions, but it could be a complete coincidence. But let me just touch on some of the lyrics. All right, let me see if I can read my notes in the dark here. So I'll just touch, I think, on the ones that I see as similar from my song that I also see in his song. So I say, early one morning in my cabin I woke, the pot-bellied stove was in need of a stoke. And again, like I said, his song is he's waking up cold in the winter camping environment and trying to start a fire. Gotta make that cold wood burn. Whatever, that's what you would do. If it's cold and it's the winter and you have wood as a heat source, you're gonna make a fire.
You gotta have a fuel source.
Fine, not that big of a coincidence. And then there's just references to knives. Like I grab my big knife just to show I'm the boss, grab my compass so I don't get lost, And he makes several references to knives. Let me see if I can. He says, trying to find service on my cell phone, felt all right with my knife on my belt though. And again, totally understandable. If you're going winter camping, you should probably bring a knife. And then I say, turn real fast and I got the fear. And he says, I'll admit, hell yeah, I felt fear. So there's fear. Also something that would happen in the woods, like I was saying, that loneliness. But then it just starts to it's just too much of a coincidence. Like I say, a quarter mile away, I found myself at the source, a scared little girl and a being with force. And he also references a quarter mile away, he finds a second set of tracks. So we're both talking about a quarter mile away. And then another quarter, which I didn't notice this till I was taking notes, but I say it was 3:45, but it was looking like dusk. It was 3:45, but it was looking like dusk. And then it became slug raps, 50 yards into the wooden brush. It got so thick that it looked like dusk. It sealed the deal for me. Just when I heard the looked like dusk, I was like, that's exactly the same line from my song. It's hip hop. Like we borrow things from each other as artists. And if anything, it's a huge honor. I mean, if this is the case, if I'm not just completely full of it and if I don't have delusions of grandeur, it's a huge compliment, I just want to find out. I just want to know once and for all, or at least get your opinion on it. So please leave me some comments, like listen to the two songs. They're both streamable now. That was another thing, is like I've brought this up to people over the years and I never really had a way to play both the songs for them. My song was only available on Bandcamp for like the last 10 years and most people don't really even know what that is. So it's not like I'm going around telling people, but I brought this up to maybe like 2 or 3 people over the last 10 years. So now you can actually do it. You could sit down, you can make a playlist of these 2 songs and you could sit down and listen to them and just, give me your opinion. Let me know what you think. And there's also good reason. Like I was saying, like the CD was across the street from the Electric Fetus. Chances that he went over there and bought it don't seem likely, but I'm sure he knows people in Duluth. Maybe he went and stayed at someone's house and they had the CD and they're just like, hey, check this out, listen to this. And I do think he would have actually listened to it because, not to brag, but my music is all right. Like I feel like the music that I created was not your average amateur rapper product, like I stand out a little bit with my lyrics. So I think he would have noticed. And there's good reasons. I mean, that album cover is the album cover that the song is on, that the CD is on,
Words.
The album cover of the CD is, of course, supposed to look like God Loves Ugly. So that right there is me, paying tribute to him. And then there's a song on there called Self-Portrait where I say, I must admire that height that other people have obtained, but try as one might, which is a reference to the chorus on the first song on the Lucy Ford EP CD, where the hook is, I just might just. So it makes a ton of sense. Plus the stylistic thing, like I was talking about earlier. I mean, maybe he did think I was copying him more than, I like to admit. So I think all those things together, all three things together, make a really valid point for why he would have possibly made a reference to me and my music in that song. And then the last thing I'll say about his lyrics, they're just it's not that tragic, it's not a shame, you're not the hunted, you're not the aim. You're just another dog with hunger pains. I was so afraid that you'd become the game. I forgot to worry about what you became. And that's repeated several times at the end of the song. And I don't know what that means, but it's cool to ponder. And then I was going to use a totally different thumbnail for the cover of this video, but I decided against it because it really might not have anything to do with me, and I don't want to, seem desperate for views or start any sort of like online beef with, another Minnesota musician that I love. So yeah, I'm not going to be that guy. All right, well, seriously, listen to the songs. Let me know in the comments what you think. Send me a text and tell me I'm insane. Whatever, whatever you want to do. But I really appreciate you watching, and I hope the lighting turned out okay. All right, Ray the Wolf, signing out. I'll see you on the next video.